whether Tanishka or somebody added the music or if that just is automatic. If it was one of us behind the scenes, we appreciate it. It's always good to have a little vibe in the 2 minutes where we kill time. I guess we'll just give people 2 minutes to come in. Let me also enter this comment here. I'm completely scattered here because my last 2 weeks have been. Well, I told Tanisha I was averaging 9 hours of calls a day, and she reacted surprised, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, and then I went back and scanned my calendar, and no, it's about right. It's been a busy time.
Yeah. So, and I guess for people that are joining us, the reason we're having so many calls is there's a lot of interest in one, the tax bill. So we'll obviously talk about that, and there's been a broader conversation on U.S. government debt, taxes, and so that's all. And broadly, people don't like to pay taxes. This is going through kind of all of those things today.
This is supposed to be the slow season. It's between April and October when people forget about this stuff, and yet I feel that way right now. And we'll definitely get into it. I'm gonna look at my clock here.
Yeah, we'll get started. And while you're joining, just let us know where you're joining us from. I always like to know that. It also helps us know which are the tax things that'll be more interesting. If we see more Californians or New Yorkers, we may know SALT may be more interesting for you. If we see a lot of Texas folks, then maybe SALT's less interesting. So
that's fair.
Although if you don't know what SALT is, you're also in the right spot.
Decent number of people have relocated over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe in part because of the SALT changes. So maybe some of these Texans are going to be, New Yorkers again sometime soon. Oh, look at that. Liz and Dean, both New Yorkers, first ones to chime in. So that's relevant intel. Good to see both of your names. Tom from South Dakota. Okay, so that's a less relevant SALT state. We always end up with Bruce from Boston. We end up with a lot of familiar names here. It's good to see a bunch of you all again. It's Gary from Oklahoma, which is familiar with Gary, and Rocky from New Jersey. So a good mix. Why don't we're 3 minutes in. Our goal here is to aim for about 45 as usual. If there's a bunch of questions, we'll definitely stick around and make sure that we answer everybody's whatever he needs. But why don't we dig in? I'm Jeff. We got Mani here. We're here, and you see here that we mentioned Farhan. He's our solar expert, and he'll be joining in a little bit to talk about that. But we're here to talk about the big, beautiful bill, and just naming it what it is, what it's called, and specifically some of the really important tax changes that came as a result. And so, the point today is to talk through some of those big changes and then specifically give a bunch of actionable insight into how they maybe change your life, your tax planning approach, and how you order your finances. I feel like I often, don't take too much time here. You know us. I'm Jeff, head of product partnerships, whatever, lots of different stuff at Valur. Mani here, CEO and founder. I'm mostly gonna tee this stuff up. Mani has been reading the bill line by line for the past few weeks and is the resident expert. I'm in DC and I'm a lawyer, so I feel like I get some of this stuff by osmosis, and I've certainly read every word at least once. But we'll dig into it. So what's the agenda? Mani, this is mostly, I feel like, your list. We talked about a lot about kind of what scope to go into or what depth to go into here and what the scope is. There is a lot in this bill, right? And we're not going to cover everything. So maybe talk a little bit about how we decided to talk about these categories in particular.
Yeah. So I think that's the two things that I really thought about of like what topics are. One, what are the topics that we're getting the most questions about? So unsurprising, people on this call, people that use Valur, people that care about taxes are impactful enough and are impactful enough for them to take action. And so what are the things that are most relevant to them that are driving the questions we're seeing? as also when we kind of read through the bill, what were the kind of opportunities we saw for kind of our audience and customers that would, candidly reduce your tax liabilities or increase your taxes, because that's fundamentally, no one does taxes for fun. People do it because of the impact and the financial impact and being able to keep more for you and your family. And so that was kind of really the lens of what do we hear from you that you're interested in? And what did we think as we read through this saw opportunities that could help you keep more for you and your family?
And I think importantly, that second category, really those two categories don't always overlap because these bills are big, they're long, they're detailed, and very often the language and the coverage aren't, they don't kind of realize the implications of some of this stuff. And you really need to know what you're doing to grasp that a change to, subsection C of section 170 that changes the way that, certain fixed costs are calculated actually means that solar is now a viable thing, as an example. And so that's what we're here for. We're going to talk through some of those nuances, plus some of the big picture, more popular stuff like SALT and tax breaks and the estate tax that maybe most of you are pretty familiar with. Really quickly, again, you know us, you know Valur, but for some of the newer faces here, just to lay out how we come at this, Valur, our angle on this is that we're here to help you take advantage of the things that we're going to talk about today. We have built out a platform that helps you identify and evaluate the opportunities that we're going to talk about, how they apply to your life, and then implement strategies to take advantage of them. And so jumping onto our platform and using our tools really helps you go from the germ of an idea that we're going to give you today to you've got something in place, actionable, and saving money. And we do that really quickly, inexpensively, efficiently, and effectively. So
yeah, and the one thing I'd add is typically kind of most of the things we focus on, they're focused on 6 to 7 or higher or 8 figures of tax savings. That's kind of the core area where Valur focuses of what are those opportunities that can do that, whether it's ordinary income, capital gains, or estate planning. Most of the things we talk about today will be in that realm of 6, 7, 8 figures of tax savings. But some of these things will be smaller numbers, but applicable to the same audience who would be taking advantage of some of these other structures.
That's right. So, if you're itemizing, for example, and taking advantage of that new SALT deduction, very likely you're making enough money where the kind of ordinary income planning that we're doing might make sense, or the capital gain or estate planning might make sense. So it all interacts, and money's right. That's the target, and that's the goal. So with that in mind, let's get into it. You saw the first item on this list is something near and dear to our hearts. We are fundamentally a startup, although every day it becomes more like we're middle stage, been around for 5 years now. But we're a startup, and we think a lot about the startup ecosystem. And so the idea here is that investing in whether that's
I think Jeff might have had some technical difficulties. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm not sure where he dropped off there, but real kind of highlight call out here is that investing your time or money in the startup ecosystem just got much more attractive. So and it's an interesting piece of the startup ecosystem, probably the definition kind of from a financial point of view got expanded. So we'll start with, and the most impactful area was in QSBS, so the Qualified Small Business Stock Exemption. This in some ways has its own definition of what a startup is. And as a result, the government gives financial incentives to invest, join, or start a startup or small business by this definition. So what is QSBS? QSBS allows you to avoid capital gains taxes on your equity in startups or small businesses by this definition. Most of the small businesses that QSBS refers to are technology startups. There are some other exceptions, but that's kind of really where the focus will be today. Now, historically, your ability to avoid capital gains taxes is either the greater of $10 million or 10x your basis in the company. We'll ignore the 10x your basis for right now. What that practically means is each individual, so whether that's an individual or a non-grantor trust or another type of trust, can avoid, if you have $10 million of shares in what was a startup, you've held it for 5 years, it meets a few other qualifications, you can avoid $10 million in taxes. Now, that limit got increased to $15 million. So what that meant is if you start your company after this bill comes into play, you can individually avoid $15 million, up to $15 million. You can avoid taxes on $15 million of QSBS. Now, the critical part is it's going to take some time to come into play because you have to start your company after the deadline and you have to hold those shares for 5 years to be able to avoid the full $15 million exemption. But the second part of this benefit is that historically QSBS, there was a cliff. You didn't get any QSBS benefits unless you held your shares for 5 years. Now the really attractive opportunity is you start to get partial benefits earlier. So starting at 3 years. So this means if you've held your shares for 3 years, whether it's you've been an employee in your share, you've held your shares for 3 years, or you're an investor, you can avoid 50% of the taxes, of the capital gains taxes, up to $15 million per entity. Now, at year 4, it's 75%. And so what this means is, hey, not only can you avoid taxes on a larger amount, going from 10 to 15 million, but you can also start to do that earlier and get tax benefits. And this is, if you think about from why this makes the startup ecosystem more attractive, is I can tell you, we have conversations every day with early employees, founders, and candidly, it's like when they're looking at this, they're looking at the exit and being able to say, hey, if you can avoid 100% of the taxes, first of all, there's no better tax benefit out there. This makes it attractive. This is part of people's calculus when they decide to sell a company. And so when you start to say, hey, you can avoid taxes on a larger amount, or you can start getting some of those tax benefits earlier, it will change the calculus. So we'll see more sales, more capital investment. The throughput of capital is going to increase, which makes it more attractive from a capital allocation standpoint as well.
And I think just to add, kind of from the perspective of the individuals that we work with, it's kind of taking a step down from that kind of policy orientation, which is totally correct. Where I think this really matters is we talk to founders and early employees all the time who are considering taking money off the table, taking advantage of their early success, and who are wary of doing that at year 3 because they're not QSBS eligible yet. They realize that if they hold, they're gonna move. They're gonna hold on until year 5 just to get over that cliff. Now all of a sudden, taking secondaries in year 3.5 might make a lot more sense, and that means, as Monty said, that unlocks a lot of deals. It also just means that individuals are going to be better able to take advantage of the value that they've produced, that they've created, which is
yeah. And one of the interesting things is, one, the size of the startup ecosystem has expanded tremendously. We expect this to continue. We're starting to see alternative forms of financing, larger pools of capital, and this is reflective in an increase from 10 to 15 million. The value of these companies, if you look at the top of publicly listed companies, it's mostly tech companies. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, that wasn't true. It was industrials. The reality is now economic value is mostly derived by what we deem as tech companies today. And so that's going to continue, and it's going to make this early stage system more attractive. The other piece we're seeing is small businesses. I'm going to colloquially call these startups. They used to be defined where you could get the tax benefits if you receive the equity or exercise the equity when the company had up to 50 million in assets. That also increased 50%. So now you're a quote unquote startup or small business that qualifies for QSBS, you have less than $75 million in assets. So what does this practically mean for startups out there that start is, one is QSBS is more valuable. Each person who has equity can avoid up to $15 million of capital gain, of taxes on capital gains before they do QSBS stacking and multiply that. More employees, more investors will qualify because before, if they invested or got equity when the company had 60 million in assets, they didn't qualify. Guess what? Now they do. And typically at those stages, you have more employees, more investors. So the pool of people that will benefit from this is more attractive. And this also makes it more attractive to larger allocators because those folks typically it's not worth their time to invest $1 million or $2 million. But these later things where the company's worth closer to 75 million, it may be worth their time to put capital in, and these tax benefits may increase our allocation to the space.
And so I think the upshot, Monty, then is that gets at least marginally easier to raise money, and also marginally easier at least to hire and to incentivize folks to join, right? If I can tell someone that we're looking to hire that, in the old world, their equity would have been worth what it's worth, but they wouldn't have been tax-free. And now all of a sudden we've raised X dollars and we're in that gap between 50 and 75. And I can tell you, if you exercise today, your equity is going to be QSBS eligible. And by the way, more of it and earlier, all of a sudden that equity offer just became a lot more valuable.
Yeah, I wish I'd been able to put it as succinctly as that, but equity in startups just got a lot more valuable. That's right. And that means investors, employees, founders, everyone is going to benefit from that. And that means we should see more people, our best and brightest, continue to go into this space, and so more innovation.
That's right. I want to talk about R&D for 1 second, but before we do that, we have this upshot down at the bottom, and I think this is really kind of an important insight here. For our purposes, for Valur's business purposes, in a sense, all of these changes slightly shrink our client base because more people are going to have more of their gains protected from tax. At the same time, it makes the kind of planning that we do more valuable for each individual who is over that limit, who would have otherwise been at, paying tax on benefits, at 20 million or whatever it is. There's more exemption per trust, and there's more gains to be had from QSBS stacking. And so the one kind of selfish and tactical insight here is QSBS stacking also became more valuable if you're over that new limit. Which is important. But then also, I know you were about to turn to, I think, to R&D, which is a totally separate thing, but also really important for startup founders and companies.
Yeah, I mean, really what this means is that it's easier for, now most startups burn capital, but the tricky thing was one of the R&D changes that happened was it didn't allow you to write off engineering costs, R&D costs against your revenue. So startups could be burning capital, but owe taxes, which increases their burn and makes them less likely to succeed. The law brought back part of the old where we used to be so that you can write off domestic R&D costs. And as a result, it just puts startups in a better kind of financial position where they're not burning money and potentially have a tax liability, which again, just increases the health of the ecosystem.
That's right.
And I think that's probably kind of the real key things here. But just broadly, the equity in the early stage ecosystem got more valuable. And the way we scope and define the early stage ecosystem from a tax benefits point of view just got larger.
That's right. Other things got larger too, like opportunities to plan for non-startup equity or really all kinds of capital gains. This is a big part of what Valur does. There are a few strategies that are tried and true here. One that used to be a big deal in the latter part of the last decade was opportunity zones. We'll talk about them in detail, but big picture, this is a tax break that sunsetted over time and became less and less valuable. And the new bill brings them back, and in a really supercharged kind of way, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. So I'd even take a step back and say opportunity zones got a lot more attractive for people that have already realized capital gains. Now, there's a whole category of opportunity zones are essentially, in most cases, a real estate investment. And the idea is to drive investment in underinvested areas. Now, I say in most cases because the way that opportunity zones were defined, the law and the previous bill and the current bill actually leave some opportunity where it doesn't have to be traditional real estate in the way we consider it. We see things that oil fields can still meet the criteria. There is some flexibility in there, but it is typically defined by reinvestment in improving the real estate. Now, what are the big improvements? One, became permanent. When it was passed in 2017, it was a 10-year structure. So, and you could defer the taxes till 2026, which is why opportunity zones, that was a fixed time. So whether you rolled your capital into an opportunity zone in 2019 or 2025, you got to defer your taxes till 2026. As it's a year away from 2026, it has gotten less valuable to be able to put your money to an opportunity zone for the tax benefit of deferring your taxes till 2026, which is why we've seen opportunity zones become less, I'd say interesting, but less financially attractive.
As a tax play, at least, right? If you're looking to invest in real estate, you might as well get a tax break, right? There were reasons to do that. But as a tool for people who are agnostic as to where they're investing and are looking for tax savings, other things got much more valuable relative to opportunity zones over the years.
Yes, 100%. Now, what the new bill does is it makes it permanent. So we don't know, so there's no endpoint. Now, future laws could change that, but as of now, we can plan for a longer time horizon. Now, importantly, these new uh, benefits only start from 2027. So we can really have effectively a dead period for a year and a half where the benefits of, and we'll get into these benefits, are more attractive a year and a half from now. So we don't really get much tax deferral. There's other benefits we get, and those don't start till January 1st, 2027. So it's a little bit of a dead zone. Now, candidly, I can tell you, Valor, we're going to be heads down for how to maximize this. But some of the big benefits are you can defer if you roll your capital gains within 180 days of realizing them into an opportunity zone. That part stayed the same. You can defer your taxes for 5 years. This is now, it's not a fixed year. So before is you got to defer them till 2026. Now the new rule is you can defer them for 5 years on a rolling basis. So if you invest in 2027, you're deferring till 2033. If you invest in 2030, you're deferring them till 2036. So that 5-year period is a rolling period. One of the other big and highly attractive parts of this bill is, and this is kind of a new addition, is on the amount that you defer in taxes. So your realized capital gains that you roll into an opportunity zone, you can avoid taxes on between 10 to 30% of those already realized gains. If you hold the investment for 5 years, you can avoid taxes on 10% of the realized capital gains already. That's kind of the base number as long as you hold it for 5 years. Now, if you invest in a rural opportunity zone, you can avoid taxes on 30% of that already realized gain. This bill was really candidly, it gives a ton of benefits from this, as well as more broadly to encourage investment in rural areas. So that's kind of, it's not only you get to defer the taxes, you can avoid some of the taxes. The third big benefit is that if you hold the opportunity zone for 10 years, you get to avoid capital gains taxes on that opportunity zone investment. Now, this benefit stays the same and is fairly consistent, but really kind of what you're getting this is you get tax deferral, you get to reduce your tax liability on some of those deferred taxes, and you get to avoid taxes on the reinvestment. Now, that's a real kind of high level financial impact. The other really interesting things is it's really trying to drive, you can see the Republican influence on this, it's really trying to drive reinvestment in rural areas. So this opportunity zone bill reduced the number of, we call them tracts, they're essentially census tracts defined by the government to define kind of the land area in the US. It is reducing the number of land census tracts that qualify for opportunity zones. Part of why this bill is going to take a year and a half to to go live is because they're going to be redefining what those tracts are. But they dramatically cut down the number of land areas that qualify. They're also they're tightening up kind of income requirements. They're also tightening up how much improvement you have to make in the land, except in rural areas. They're actually making that more lenient to define what census tracts qualify if they're rural. And this is under 50,000, population centers under 50,000. And the amount of improvement you have to make to the land. And really kind of at a high level, what this means is you're cutting the taxes someone owes on the realized capital gains. They roll into rural opportunity zone investment. You're reducing the burden of capital investment in those areas, and you're making you're not really tightening up the requirements on what rural areas qualify. And this is where it's obviously the Republican base has a lot of rural kind of population. You're seeing that this was a kind of how do we get more reinvestment in our districts.
That's right, and I think there's some really kind of interesting implications for where money ends up flowing here for the end user, for people who are watching this right now, and for Valur and our clients. I feel like the action item here is opportunity zones. The math got stronger, certainly extended, and then also stronger in a lot of ways. And it's going to be even more important than it used to be very careful about what opportunities you're taking advantage of, and kind of, who you're working with and what funds that you're throwing money into, right? Because there's going to be a wide range of potential outcomes depending on whether you're in the right fund that's taking advantage of these extra kickers and adders and additional savings. And so design is going to be really important. And we've got, as Mani said, a year and a half to make sure that we're doing that right, so that when this comes online, we've got the right opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really hitting it. All these benefits sound great. The traditional downsides of this are, one, there tends to be really high fees in these structures. And this is where we may see some things there's high fees because there's requirements, there's a lot of slicker, and it's also kind of a niche area, candidly, but making it permanent, and reducing requirements in the rural areas, we may see lower cost opportunities here, more flexibility on rural investments. But the historic downside of these are not a ton of places with long track records in this space. It's really high fee, and you're kind of getting very concentrated. It's a very concentrated real estate investment bet. So this is one of the things of there's this tax phrase. You don't want to let the tax tail wag the dog. You don't want to invest pure. You don't want to put 100% of your portfolio or a large percent of your portfolio into an opportunity zone just for the tax benefits, because you have a very concentrated real estate bet that has high fees and so those things. Now, a lot of these tax benefits can be offsetting some of those fees, but we expect to see one is fees will drop. This is being permanent. Increased tax benefits should draw more capital, but it is still something where you have to really look at, does this fund make sense in a broader portfolio construction or the opportunity, or not put too many eggs in one basket.
And that's a conversation, of course, that we have every day with you all. So, and that'll happen more over the next little bit. We're almost halfway through both the content and the time. So I think we're on track, and we're getting here to, I think, a couple of maybe bigger picture topics, right? The last two have been in some ways really in the weeds. We can, of course, take a step back and talk big picture about how QSBS incentivizes investment in startups and opportunity zones in real estate. This next one is really a very big topic. In some ways, it's niche. It applies only to, or rather, it helps or applies only to families with a good amount of money. But that's a growing portion of the population, and so these changes to estate, gift, and GST taxes really matter. And so the high level here, I want to get into the weeds a little bit, but the high level here is that there was a cliff coming where the estate tax exemption was set to drop down significantly from its current level. And that is no longer happening. We've been talking to you all, to our clients, for years about how at the end of 2025, the estate tax exemption was going to drop from 15 million down to half of that. And that was going to be really meaningful for a lot of families now who are in that, mid to high 7-figure range. Well, the upshot of this bill is that a $15 million exemption is now made permanent, and it's growing with inflation. And that means that a lot more families are going to fall under that exemption and aren't going to have to worry about estate tax, about gift tax, about GST. It also importantly retains that $19,000 and growing gift tax exclusion, which is in some ways the way that many people first interact with the gift and estate regime. Many families give a gift to their kids, and that's the first way that you interact with this stuff. So big picture is more gifting is tax-free. Of course, there's implications there for what strategies make sense and when, but does that capture it, Monty?
Yeah, I think that's a high level. It continues. I think it's still going to incentivize early planning. There's just less of a immediate get things done by the end of the year, but it's still going to incentivize kind of the reality is these numbers are increasing year by year. So, most families view it as a good thing, but the reality is you're building the wealth where you're concerned about gift, estate, generation skipping taxes. You're growing your assets by more than inflation. And so the reality is it still incentivizes doing this stuff earlier, but there's not an immediate year-end crunch. So you can more incrementally get started if this is something that's going to worry you.
Yeah, sorry, before we move on to this, Bruce just asked a question. I think this is about opportunity zones. Does the rolling 5-year deferral start now or just in 27? If this is about opportunity zones, the answer is 27.
Yes. Right? Yeah, it starts with the new funds in 2027. So this is why it's really viewed as a dead zone.
Gap, right?
Yeah, we're kind of in a dead zone period for opportunity zones till Jan 1.
Now remember, you've got 180 days. So if we do our job and if we're ready to go on January 1st, 2027, that'll be able to look back and capture capital gains that happened after the middle of 2026. So we're doing our best to help fill that gap.
I think that's July 6th. I think it's July 6th, 2026. So if your capital gain is July 6th, or maybe it's July 7th, 2026, then you would be able to benefit from that.
Because they couldn't do it cleanly as half a year. They had to say 180 days. And so that means it's January 6th or July 6th and not the 6th. But yeah, it's 2027. So this estate tax conversation allows me to make a point that many of you have heard me make. And I this is a really important insight that is intuitive And you all are sophisticated, and I think you get it, but it's not something that we really necessarily play out in our heads. The way, on every call that we have with clients who are, starting to enter the high net worth arena, the question is, when should I begin estate tax planning? Should I even do this? Do I need to worry about this? And our answer is always, if you are going to be over the limit by the end of your life, then there's value to planning today. And in fact, to planning yesterday. And so the entire question that we encourage people to ask is, do you think you're gonna be over the limit? And this bill does two things. First of all, it makes that much more predictable. We know what the limit's gonna be, unless of course there's another overhaul, which there might be at some point. But for now, we know the limit's 15 million and growing by inflation. And that allows you to do some mental math. I think this is a really important insight, especially for families that we talk to who tend to be in the $3 million to $10 million range. And we talk to plenty of clients above that. Their planning is easy. They know they're gonna be over the limit. They've got this down, they're planning. But for that family that just had their first big win or has only been earning good money for the last few years and is in the $5 million range, in the old days, the lawyers might have told them, don't bother yet. You can do this planning down the road. We don't know if you're gonna be over the limit. As a result of financial education, of the increased access to high growth assets, especially in tech, people kind of understand that assets grow fast these days. And even if things slow down, assets grow. And so if you've got $5 million today and you're 40, I don't think people truly internalize how much money you're going to have by the end, right? Just use a naive, simple rule of 72, doubling every 10 years. Forget even higher growth than 7.2%, which you're going to get more than that on average. But you double every 10 years. That 5 million, by the time you're 50 is 10. By the time you're 60 is 20. By the time you're 70 is 40. If you live to 80, that's $80 million, right? And of course, there's a lot of nuance to that. But those numbers get really big by the end. And that means that more people should be doing this kind of planning than really realize it. And I feel like this bill lays that bare and makes it very obvious that people should be thinking about this stuff early on.
Yeah. By the way, I do want to say, I would bet that the gift and estate exemption does become a political hot topic in the future. It is a political snowball. It's attractive. Tax the rich. It's not something that is, it's interesting. We say made permanent. The reality is it's made permanent until there's a new political party or a different politician has a different point of view in power.
Yeah. That being said, and that's absolutely right, and you need to be aware of the possibility that this number might change in the future. With that being said, it's never been made permanent this way before with an inflation adjustment. And also, it actually hasn't, it's been a political hot potato, absolutely. There hasn't been a big constituency or a really kind of momentum to reduce it. And that's been an interesting thing over the last 30 years. It was $1 million exemption in 1999, and we're at 15 now. But Monty's right. The point is you've got to be prepared. You've got to be nimble and prepared for the possibility that this changes over time. And that just bolsters the case for early planning, right? Yeah. One thing that requires less planning, unless it is move to New York because now you pay less tax, is this SALT deduction and tax cut stuff. This is something that's been in the news forever. If you're paying attention at all, I see some commenters from Texas and elsewhere just joined Josh. So maybe this is less relevant, but this has been in the news forever. The idea that this state and local income tax deduction was a thing. It's been a moving target as part of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act. The amount of state and local tax that you're able to deduct if you're taking advantage of itemized deductions dropped to $10,000, which basically was a punitive additional tax on high tax state residents. Well, it's gone back up, and all of a sudden you're now getting a bigger deduction from the taxes you're paying to your high tax state, right?
Yeah. So I could say, having moved from Florida to New York in this year, this is a nice thing. It was a very powerful topic for particularly Republican legislators in high tax states of New York and California, New Jersey, where they really held out for kind of to get this number instated. And it was one of the few things that was able to bring them together. The broad idea is now, like, if this didn't pass, you could only offset 10K of your local taxes at the federal level. But now that number is up to 40K. So that's and the reality is, like, we ran this. If you're a Google engineer from California, some basic assumptions in there. This is an additional 10.5K per year of savings for you. That's essentially free money. So
and importantly, doesn't require planning beyond figuring out if you're
Yeah.
taking that itemized deduction, right? This is and because it doesn't require a lot of planning, and also because we're running short on time, I think we can kind of tick through these things pretty quickly. Naren, yeah, we'll post, we'll share the recording afterwards, and you'll be able to click through all this stuff.
Yeah.
So SALT deduction cap increased. People are saving a bunch of money if they live in a high tax state. Extension of tax breaks. Similarly, we didn't do the math here, but the brackets were set to change and were likely to tax this income at a higher rate. Those are made permanent. No tax on tips, additional kind of enhanced credits. These are important, but also not something that really require a bunch of action here. Jasdeep asked, how quickly does it phase out for earnings above 500K? Mani, do you know if there's a SALT phase out? I'm actually not.
No. So by the way, we use 500K, but it doesn't mean it's there. You're still going to get increased benefits as your tax rate increases. I'm trying to remember if there is a phase out number, but we use 500K. It doesn't mean that it phases
now
out.
That you mention it, I think maybe one of Guido or someone can send us a message and remind us. It does phase out in the sense that if you're over a certain income level, your deduction goes down, but that doesn't change usually the marginal impact. So that's that. I want to get to solar. We have 8 minutes on the original timing. We'll stick around and keep going, and I think there's a lot of interest in this. This is in some ways the most actionable thing for today. Right? QSBS is actionable for sure. It's not going to change your day-to-day planning. The fact that solar has been extended through retained through 2027, and made clear and actionable is really important. And so we have Farhan here, our head of ordinary income planning, who's going to talk about these changes, preservations. The idea being that solar's around and you can take advantage of it for at least the next couple of years. And we do a lot of this stuff. It's clearly a very popular program, and it's good news that it's still here. So welcome, Farhan. Glad you could join for this part of it. Do you want to, I guess, just talk big picture about what this means for our clients?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of speculation, in the industry, and people who are interested in solar as a tax strategy for ordinary income, right? Where the tax bill is going to stand, what Republicans think about it. And I think last month was chaotic. We looked at 5 different versions of the tax bill and didn't know where it's going to settle. My interpretation of this is that we have gotten a way better version than the versions that I've looked at. And the short answer for someone who's thinking about, how should they plan about, as an ordinary income strategy here for solar, is it's essentially that the tax credit, solar investment tax credits, Section 48E, is here till 2027. What that essentially means is that the projects you're going to buy can get completed till 2027 and would be eligible for tax credits. So if you buy the projects in 2025, your whole idea would be that you would like to use the tax incentives against 2025 income. That means the project needs to be placed in service in 25, would be eligible for tax incentives. So there's one big question: what should we think about for this year? There is some time. We have a huge demand with the new tax bill. Now that people have more clarity, we're sitting in the fence. That tax bill is here. It's here for another 2.5 years. There's another caveat of safe harbor and other things that we'll talk about. But the headline here is that the solar investment tax credits are here. They are here for this year. They are here for 26, and they are here for 27 for the.
And I want to drive this home, and you've done a good job. But just to make it very clear, because this is the way the question is typically framed to us, and has been since it looked like this was going to be a subject of this bill. Does this change anything for this year? If someone was thinking about doing solar in February, now this bill is passed, does this change anything about their decision making this year? And I think the answer is no, but I don't know how you.
No. It's the same thing as it was last year.
Yeah.
And it's the same, it's going to be the same thing till 2027. I think that's the simplest way I can put this.
It changes the time horizon, right? Like really we're saying is nothing changes through 2027 before nothing changed till 2033. So there is like in the immediate future, no changes. It's changing stuff.
That's right. If anything, maybe this makes it more urgent. Not that the numbers are changing for this year. It's the same as it would have been before the bill. But rather, if you were on the fence, if you were thinking maybe I'll do this, in a couple of years, now's the time.
Yeah.
Right. This may be the last. Now, speaking of political footballs, there's every chance that the Democrats win the next few elections, and there's a conversation about bringing this back, of course. But for now, this is sunsetting. It's time to do it. With that said, Farhan, do you want to talk for 30 seconds about the extension beyond 2027 and kind of that safe harbor idea?
So there's a provision in the bill that says if the projects begin construction, right, within the 12 months of bill's enactment, so July 4th, 2026, they are not under this 2027 deadline. They get another 4 years of runway. They can push the projects, I believe, for 2030, 2031. Now, these, again, there is a executive order that we have seen that came on July 7th, 2020. Yeah, July 7th this year. And what actually Republicans are doing, they're looking to tighten up the definition of what begin construction means. Currently, there is a safe harbor clause that says if you secure 5% of the material for the projects that are scheduled to complete over that period of time, right, you're actually meeting the criteria. And that's where, you're seeing a lot of developers securing material and the projects and everything. And there will be projects. There is a high probability that they would stay here, right? But there is an executive order that people are really confused about, right? What it says about Section 48E. Does it say anything about the 2027 deadline? Because it seems very opposite to, what the tax bill came out. And the short answer is that it doesn't affect the 2027 clock. It doesn't affect the tax credits that are here, depreciation that is here. And we'll talk about the depreciation. What it affects another 4 year of runway that the developers are planning that they may be able to keep the shop open. Sorry.
To put another way, under the pure language of the bill, it appears that developers have room to be strategic about extending that deadline by beginning projects. That may or may not be available, but it doesn't change the fundamental.
I think we have a lot of time to get better clarity on that. That's not a question for today.
One thing that does change about 2025, and we kind of glossed over this or forgot about it, I suppose, and AJ flags this. It's a good point, and this is your next point on the list here. Actually, the numbers haven't gotten worse in 2025. They've improved, right? Because 100% bonus depreciation is back.
Exactly. So, and this is obviously it moves the IRR on these things. So last year, people were claiming federal depreciation that was amortized over the course of 5 years, right? That's a customer material participation, ROIR, and other things. But this year you're so for everybody's context, all the tax credits vest in year one. And now with 100% bonus depreciation, all the federal level depreciation is going to be vesting in year one. So you could take all the tax credits and also all the federal level benefits, you can claim all of them in year one, right? There is nothing in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that you'd have to wait through. That boosts your ROI, right? At around, if you're putting $1, you could get $1.40, $1.45 in tax savings in year one.
As opposed to $1.10, $1.15, $1.20 like it was in the past, which to AJ's point means the ROI in the first year and the time adjusted net present value IRR or ROI is just significantly higher because of this change. You're claiming potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra depreciation in year one.
Yeah. And one thing to add here is, and that's a question that comes up regarding material participation, right? So people think about that there's going to be access depreciation, right, in previous years that they couldn't take, right? It's just, that's how it was scheduled. And now with the 100% bonus depreciation, again, all the tax incentives on federal level are vesting in year one. So that's your major year where you'll be making purchase. If you're making purchase in 25, you got to be active in 25 if you're using the tax incentives against active income. But for the future years, you could be very strategic, right? You may have state level depreciation, right? That depends on the number. You could choose to go active, you could choose to go passive, you can carry it forward. Because again, if you're getting $70, $80 over the course of 6 years, $45 is coming in year one, right? And that is the major year that people need to think about. And that's why, again, we're going into, and I would like to spend 15 seconds on this, that there is a huge demand for solar at this point of time, right? And it's because of, again, we got a boost in ROI, right? With the 100% bonus depreciation. There is 100% clarity on investment tax credits staying in till 2027. And one thing that I forgot to mention, there's been a confusion. So residential solar tax credits are going away in 2025. What the residential solar tax credit means that people used to buy a solar system that they would fully own or lease it and put it on top of their property. And they used to claim a 30% tax credit. That is going away. Right? That's a different tax credit that has nothing to do with the commercial projects or projects structured as a service agreement. The projects Valur offers are commercially structured, right? These are service agreement, power purchase agreement, and other things. These are not residential projects, and these are not even projects.
I mean, what I'm going to call out is, so solar renewable energy was a really big political hot topic, particularly within the Republican caucus here, right? This is where Trump has his point of view. Based on the state you're in as a Republican, there's very different points of view. Really kind of the reason the bill ended up where it is I think there's 4 or 5 Republican senators who really wanted to preserve this. And as a result, to what Farhan said, is there are certain self-installations didn't get much love, and those have different tax credits versus these leasing. The tax credits tied to solar leases were preserved through 2027. And so this is part of kind of the net thing is if you're kind of setting up solar business and running it, and all the partners we work with are structured this way because for this reason, those tax credits weren't as impacted as if you just purchase a solar system for your own house. Right?
Okay.
Exactly.
And so bottom line, if you're, and people often ask about the kind of lower bound on this stuff, our median client who's doing solar is probably in the kind of mid to high 6 figures. And the example we gave here is someone at NVIDIA. We talked to a lot of you folks earning $900,000 a year, saving $175,000 cash with solar. I don't think these changes fundamentally alter the kind of group that can benefit from this, right? Bonus depreciation moves some stuff forward. Maybe you can justify doing this at a slightly lower income level. But for the most part, the number is lower than I think people expect. If you're making, $400,000 a year, even down to the threes, this can be valuable, and that doesn't change, right, with the current bill or with the latest bill. We are past 2:45. I guess Farhan, any parting shots or points on solar in particular before we kind of talk big picture and wrap it up?
No, I think we covered most of the part that was there. Again, there was an executive order, but nothing is relevant to 2027 deadline that we're talking about here. Again, there's been a lot of stuff out there, but the 2027 deadline is the one that people should take into consideration, that it's here for 2.5 years. They need to think about it today. We'll have more clarity in a year, whether there's going to be another 4 years of runway, clarity from the Treasury on all these things. But it's ironclad. What is there is that the tax credits for these projects are here till 2027, and people have another 2.5 years to make this purchase, and particularly for this year, right? Again, people have been on the fence, and we're seeing a lot of traction. People are making the purchase, right? We're expecting to run out of projects by the end of August, and it's because of the huge demand that we have seen after the legislation has passed, and again, driving the industry. So the crux here is that it's here. It's same. It's better slightly with the bonus depreciation, but it's here till 2027, and people should focus on that. And then,
yeah, that's right. We appreciate you digging into it. I'm going to start kind of moving toward wrapping up. If folks have additional questions about any of this stuff, chime in now for sure. With that said, You can always reach us. As many of you know, we are very available, probably to our detriment given how much of this we do. Shoot us an email, Monty, Jeff, Farhan at Valur.com. You can always chat us live on our site at Valur.com or app.valur.com. I am on that chat probably 18 hours a day, and when I'm not, someone else is. We are very available. We're also, very quickly to plug, available in 10 minutes for an Ask Me Anything kind of office hours. Specifically, we're talking about solar because time is of the essence, as Farhan said, when it comes to making a purchase for this year. If you have questions about solar, whether it's about the bill or otherwise, join that. It's a Google Meet link that you can find in your emails to talk about that. Very quickly, I'll just mention this question. I clicked on Monty's answer, not the question. The models are updated for 100% bonus. We said nothing really else has changed significantly, but yes, absolutely, the models online are updated to factor in the changes. This is a big question from JR, but I'm going to do 15 seconds on it because we do think about this a lot and we can definitely talk about it. Idjits and grats are estate tax oriented solutions, very powerful. We do a lot of them. CRUTs are also very powerful, but are oriented toward capital gains tax. So we think of CRTs or CRUTs as a substitute for the opportunity zone stuff that we were talking about, as opposed to for the estate tax work. CRUTs are a way to defer, reduce, spread out, eliminate some of the capital gains tax you'll pay on the sale of appreciated assets. So they tend to be attractive when you are planning to sell an asset that has appreciated, let's say 50% or more, and that's worth 500K or more, maybe $1 million or more. If you're interested in deferring that tax, and if you're willing to spread out your liquidity over a number of years, not as long as maybe you'd think, but to give up kind of immediate liquidity, then a CRUT can be very attractive, and the bottom line numbers are large. You can go to our calculators. I'll pull up a link here. If you check out the CRUT calculator there, you'll find that over the long term, these strategies can increase your after-tax returns by 2, 3, 4, 5 times on capital gains. So that's the context to answer the question when CRUTs tend to be effective. Jump back to substance money. Do you want to answer that any further or anything else to add?
No, I was just going to say also kind of our next 2 webinars. In 2 weeks, we're going to have one. Really, the idea is portfolio construction and how do you think about diversification. The idea is really kind of modern portfolio theory. So how do you think about constructing a portfolio to kind of optimize returns without increasing risk or actually reducing risk? And then 2 weeks after that, on August 13th, this is what I'm personally very passionate about. One of the things we've done with grats, so grats are an estate planning structure. It helps you pass on assets to the next generation without using your gift exemption or paying estate taxes, is we've built in a lot of unique optimizations that candidly aren't possible unless you have technology driving this. There's direct indexing grats, or there's structures that the complexity or cost with professional service doesn't make them plausible. They're entirely legal, but just not historically technically possible. So we've done things where, in terms of how you can double the returns from just that what you pass on to future generations by just investing in the S&P via grat, or how you can lock in gains at no cost. There's a lot of these optimizations that we're using to say, how do you make grats even more powerful? And it's something that I think, particularly for people worried about the gift and estate tax or financial advisors and CPAs that are trying to bring this value to their clients, will be really beneficial for you.
I was going to add, I was going to say the same thing. This is one that's especially exciting because it really allows us to highlight our kind of creative and tech oriented side of what Valur does. A lot of what we do it kind of fits in that category. You could argue even that doing flip CRUTs or setting up trusts with a creative term that includes 2 lives and a fixed term are things that are really only possible now with us because we've streamlined the creation of these documents. At the same time, that's not kind of really moving the ball forward in terms of the strategies available. Whereas, as you said, with grats, with idjits a little bit, and with some of these other strategies where we're using technology and our expertise to unlock moves that just aren't part of what people typically do today, that's a chance to really create additional value, and it's a big part of what we do. So exciting. Join us for it. It's in a couple of weeks. I guess no more comments other than thanks. We appreciate all of you joining, listening to us talk about this stuff. It's what we do. It's what we're passionate about. Send us a line, schedule a call if you're interested in chatting more. For that schedule link, here we go. We're always available and happy to chat and help you and your clients. So appreciate you taking the time. Thank you both, Mani, Farhan, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Thanks, everyone.